Ruth tiptoed out of the room, hoping to leave quietly, but a voice called her from the open-plan kitchen, urging her to stay for breakfast. She resisted, refusing to sit, and demanded to know how she had ended up at his place in the first place. The man calmly recounted the events of the previous night. Soon, he dropped a plate of pancakes on the table and instructed her to eat. Reluctantly, Ruth walked over to the dining area and sat down. As she took her first bite, the man suddenly told her that her boyfriend was cheating on her. Shocked, Ruth choked on her food, coughing violently. The man quickly moved to her side, handing her a glass of water and gently patting her back to ease the coughing. Once she had recovered, Ruth demanded to know how he could have possibly known about Cola's infidelity. He explained that he had seen Cola and the other woman together, and after Ruth had left, they had kissed. Ruth argued that this was not enough proof. Cola could have been the other woman's boyfriend, and she herself might have been only a third party. The man remained calm, insisting that she had told him everything herself in her drunken state the night before. Panic swept over Ruth as she tried to remember what she might have revealed. He mentioned that she had spoken about wanting to start a makeup brand but lacked the capital to do so. Still uneasy, Ruth watched him leave the dining room. After a few minutes, he returned, carrying a magazine. He placed it beside her, explaining that it featured a money grant program, one that could give her enough funds to launch her cosmetics business. Ruth stared in disbelief. This was the same competition she would later win to start her business, but that victory was supposed to happen in 2023. The man encouraged her to register for the grant, his voice carrying an unusual certainty that she would win. Ruth felt a chill of confusion and fear. Why was this opportunity appearing so early? She realized that things were no longer following the order she had known. Too spooked to remain in the same space with the man, Ruth pushed her plate away, picked up the magazine, and headed for the door. The man followed her, offering to take her home, but she refused, thanked him, and walked away. When she arrived home, she found Busy and Cola in the living room with her mother, who was pacing anxiously. The moment Ruth stepped inside, her mother rushed to her, hugging her tightly in relief and demanding to know what had happened. Ruth lied, telling her mother that it had been too late to come home the previous night, so she had booked a hotel near the club and spent the night there. Her mother scolded her, warning her to always call and update her on her life, and to answer her calls. Ruth apologized for making her worried and excused herself to take a shower and change. Busy and Cola followed her to her bedroom. Cola asked what had happened to her outfit, but Ruth fired back, asking him where he had been when she left and why he hadn't noticed. She left him standing there with Busy and walked into the bathroom to shower. While Ruth showered, Busy picked up the magazine and saw the money grant event. She immediately told Cola that Ruth must be entering the competition, and if she is, then she is joining the competition too, and that she must win. Busy made Cola promise to steal Ruth's business idea for the event, plotting behind Ruth's back. By the time Ruth came out of the bathroom, the room was quiet. Cola and Busy were gone. Slowly, she walked back into her bedroom, her eyes going straight to the bed. The magazine was still there. It lay open at the page that showed the money grant competition, just as she had left it. Ruth walked closer and picked it up, turning the pages slowly. A small smile formed on her lips. She was certain Busy had seen it. That was the reason she had placed it on the bed before going into the bathroom. She had wanted it to catch Busy's attention. She had wanted curiosity to take root. And now, it had. Ruth closed the magazine and placed it neatly back on the bed. Whatever Busy and Cola were planning, she was already one step ahead. She changed into clean clothes, lay back on the bed, and stared at the ceiling for a long time, thinking about how strangely her life had begun to shift. 1 week later, Cola took Ruth out on a date. The place he chose was calm and carefully arranged. To anyone watching, they looked like a normal couple trying to rebuild their love. Ruth played her part well. During the evening, she slowly guided the conversation toward the grand competition, mentioning it in a casual way, as if it were only a passing thought. She spoke just enough to awaken interest, just enough to leave questions unanswered. Kola listened closely, telling her he was proud of the decision she was taking. He asked her what her idea for the competition was. She made sure not to reveal any real plan or idea. Instead, she allowed him to believe that nothing had been decided yet, and promised to let him know when she finalizes on any idea. Later, he apologized for the night at the club, for not watching over her when she had been drunk, for leaving her alone when she was most vulnerable. Ruth accepted his apology. Outwardly, she appeared forgiving, soft, unchanged. But inside, she remained alert. By the end of the night, she was certain of one thing: the game had already begun, and she was no longer a careless player. She was watching. And she was ready. A few days later, Busy came to Ruth with exciting news. She had finally received a scholarship to study fashion design. Busy could hardly contain her joy. She moved around the room with bright eyes and restless hands, speaking quickly, already dreaming of a new life. Ruth remembered this moment. She remembered how, in the life she had lived before, she had celebrated with Busy. She remembered smiling, hugging her, and telling her how proud she was. She also remembered Busy's parents. They were priests, gentle and deeply religious. That day, they had prayed for Ruth, laid their hands on her head, and wished her success, peace, and long life. The memory cut deep. Ruth smiled now, just as she had done before. She congratulated Busy, listened to her plans, and wished her well. From the outside, nothing had changed. But inside, she was already plotting. She knew how Busy would one day grow cold. She knew how loyalty would turn into envy. She knew how friendship would turn into betrayal. If Busy had been heartless enough to arrange her death and steal her future, then she would not let her walk freely into her dreams again. Ruth made her decision to ruin her dreams of being a fashion designer. She would be reduced to a housewife of Kola with nothing to offer to herself and to society, and as for Kola, she will make sure he remains in abject poverty and remains there. One evening, as Ruth stood outside a small cafe, warming her hands around a cup of coffee, a familiar presence moved into her line of sight. It was the man again. The stranger from that night. This time, Ruth did not pretend to be surprised. She turned to him and demanded to know his name. He introduced himself as Daniel. They spoke briefly about the grand competition. He asked her if she had made a decision about it. Ruth told him she had decided to apply. Daniel looked pleased, almost relieved. He warned her insistently not to share her ideas with anyone, not now, not later, not even after her business began to grow. The seriousness in his voice caught her attention. It was more than simple advice. It sounded like concern. Ruth studied his face as he spoke, searching for something she could not name. A dangerous thought crossed her mind. What if he knew? What if he was not just a stranger? What if he, too, had come from the future too, and knew something about her death and betrayal? The idea felt foolish, impossible. Yet her life had already become something impossible. She decided to be brave. If she was wrong, she would laugh it off as a joke. But if she was right? She lifted her eyes to his and held his gaze. Then, calmly, she asked him a single question. Do you believe in time travel?